Welcome to the Steelers Breakdown podcast featuring PennLive Steeler beat reporter Nick Farabaugh. Fresh from a primetime victory at Acrisure Stadium and ahead of yet another primetime game, Monday Night Football at Acrisure against the Giants. So it's going to be back-to-back for the New York teams, and it will be Russell Wilson getting the start to see if he can go back-to-back with a stellar offensive performance that was sparked in the second quarter of the second half of that Jets game with a furious 31-point unanswered by Russell Wilson and the Steelers. In the process, Coach Mike Tomlin was vindicated. He was turning away from Justin Fields, the possible future of the franchise, according to some, and handing the reins over to Russell. In the national media, he was universally criticized as making the wrong move for his 4-2 team. But as you have told us from the beginning, this season isn't about the regular season. It's about winning playoff games. And Mike Tomlin wanted to see what he had in Russell Wilson and if he could operate the offense more effectively with the plays as called. So he was definitely taking a victory lap after the win, making some reference to making the tough decision as he did was why he was so well compensated. Touche to Mike Tomlin. But now let's get Nick's take on what he saw from Russell Wilson and the offense that seemed to work so well and piled up, 400 yards and 37 points against the Jets. So, Nick, give us your take on this whole sort of quarterback change and what worked and what we may continue to see with this Russell Wilson offense.
Yeah, I thought the biggest thing, I think Russ did a good job of giving his playmakers chances to make plays. But I thought that was the biggest difference was the playmakers. I just think we saw all those guys make plays. Like George Pickens made so many amazing catches. And some of those balls that he caught weren't even well thrown. They were thrown up there. And I think Russell Wilson, one of his biggest traits that he will have differently from Justin Fields is that he will throw those 50-50 balls to George Pickens and not think twice about it. And you can see why. Pickens makes a circus catch off a guy's helmet. He makes the touchdown grab behind his back. He almost made another great catch down the field. He made a gorgeous catch for 44 yards down the sideline. So you can make those throws, and I think that's obviously one of the hallmarks of what Russell Wilson brings to the table. He brings a great deep ball. He's always had a beautiful moon ball, and that's part of it. And I just think Pickens stepped up, had a great game. I thought Frymuth had a great catch, right? That was a perfect throw, though, on Frymuth's ball. He threw that beautifully right over, layered it over there. You saw Najee Harris continue his rage, right? He carried over a strong performance in Vegas right into this game. Najee Harris has 15 forced missed tackles over the last 2 weeks, over his 2 100-yard games. That's really, really good. That's a big part of what has made this churn. I think finally, John, we saw Jaylen Warren look like Jaylen Warren. I think that was a really important thing, too. I think the turning point of this game, outside of obviously the Beanie Bishop pick, was 3rd and 9 in the second half. It's 23-15, 3rd and 9. Russ rolls out of the pocket, dumps it off the Warren. He stops, goes upfield for a 12-yard gain. They end up scoring a touchdown on that drive. I thought that was really important. So I thought the playmakers played their best game of the season in this game. I thought that was important. Calvin Austin, although he had the drop, had that big catch, he's getting consistently open. There's more meat left on the bone there. I think Russell Wilson in the future should be looking to see where 19 is. I think Russell Wilson does a few things that maybe fit the offense a little bit. First of all, I think his play action game is just a little bit better. He was 9 of 12, I think, on play action. And I think it had over 150 yards on those play action passes. And it's really subtle stuff. I think part of the reason they were able to really do well in this game in play action was because the Jets run so much man coverage. So they ran man coverage beaters and ran a lot of bunch sets, stacks, et cetera, to create different kind of conflicts in this defense. But I really thought that Russell Wilson is just better, at kind of turning his back to the defense, reading the defense. Because some guys, I don't think Justin Fields is fully comfortable when he turns his back to the defense, turning around and then ripping a ball. I think Russell Wilson maybe is a little bit more comfortable doing that than Justin Fields. And I think he carries out the fakes a little better. And so Russell Wilson did a nice job. He this wasn't Seattle Russ. This wasn't, Russell Wilson as peak. You can see some of the limitations he has in his game. He's not as fast or as quick as he was. I go back to first or second drive, I think it was, where he had a pocket where he could have escaped and maybe gone for a touchdown, and instead only got 1 yard. He doesn't have the same twitch that he once had. He doesn't have the same arm talent he once had. You saw a few balls that just kind of, wailed out at the sideline a little bit at times, but he still has beautiful loft on his ball. He's able to get good placement on that ball, and he's still able to hit open receivers. And that deep ball, I think, is going to be a big part of what allows him. And I thought what he did really well. We talk about this every week, John. Can you limit negativity? Because remember last week when I said one of my biggest concerns was, is Russell Wilson going to take so many bad sacks? He only was sacked once. He rolled out of the pocket a few times early in the game where it looked like, okay, he wasn't super comfortable. Remember when they went 3 and out 3 or 4 straight times in the first half? Then he got really comfortable, stood in the pocket, started firing it around, and I was like, okay, there's Russell Wilson. He looks comfortable. He looks like he's in a rhythm. You could tell he heated up throughout the game. Russell Wilson definitely knocked the rust off, got a feel for the pocket. Didn't throw one pass, in my opinion, that was even close to being picked off, which is good news. You'd love to see that. No turnover-worthy plays. No one sack that really wasn't even on him. He minimized sacks, I thought, actually, in this game. I think one of the big plays was that bootleg where he kind of fakes out the edge defender and ends up going to Pat Frymuth, and he rumbles down the sideline for about 30. I thought that was a really nice play. That aforementioned play to Warren, he beats an inside rush where Jones loses quickly and dumps off to Warren first down. I thought, Russell Wilson played well. I think he deserves credit. I also think the offensive line, down Frazier, down Fautano, down Daniels, they're playing well. McCollum filled in very admirably, didn't allow Quinn Williams to take over this game. They blocked well in the run game. So I think this was a really nice offensive performance all around. Orton Smith called a good game. So lots of good things to build upon. And I think, as I said, I think it was actually the bigger story of the game isn't even just Russ did. I think it's the collective around Russ. I think it's what the playmakers did. If they can play at this level throughout the rest of the season, they're going to get a lot of contributions, whether it's him or Fields back there. They'll get contributions from those guys. That'll be big for them. But I thought Russell Wilson did a really nice job in his first start. If he could play, like this for most weeks, I think the Steelers will be in business.
Right. And you're so right about George Pickens, who among the playmakers, he's at the top. And that sure-handed grab in the end zone, the corner of the end zone, where his hands were just like vices on that football. That was a great catch. And of course that bouncing ball that he hauled in. And as a result, I guess 111 yards in the score, he was smiling like a slit pumpkin ear to ear, after being kind of down in the mouth. And like maybe you were even kind of questioning, was his head totally in the game? You know what I mean? So the positivity of the production and how that reinforces the ambitions of a guy like Pickens, the intangibles of that. You know what I mean? I think have to be good too. You know what I mean? Getting him back in such a big way.
Right. I think that's one thing, Russ. I think Justin at times was a little tentative, just let it rip. He was playing a little bit on ice at times or just kind of feeling things out. I think Russ, over his career, it hasn't mattered, whether it was Doug Baldwin, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Cortland Sutton. It hasn't mattered at any point in his career. If he trusts his top receiver, he's going to let it run. Like, he's going to let it go. And he clearly trusts George Pickens to make those catches. And I thought that was a really big part of this. They should be feeding George Pickens targets. We have been talking about this. George Pickens should be getting fed targets each week. He's the best playmaker on this offense. I thought they just did a nice job and a better job of featuring all their 4 best guys. I thought they did a better job at featuring Freiermuth at times. They got Darnell Washington out in space on some of those leak routes. I thought the way they used Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren was much better this week. I think they're just kind of figuring out how to use all these guys. And I think, Russ's ability to kind of just understand, okay, we got man-to-man coverage. So that's going to be a one-on-one opportunity for 14. Like sometimes it doesn't matter. There was a play, I think it was on the final drive of the first half where the Steelers got their first touchdown. There was a play at the 40-yard line where Sauce Gardner gets called for defensive pass interference, which set up the touchdown. Calvin Austin dusted a dude in the slot, would have had a touchdown, but it didn't matter because Russ just looked and said 14's one-on-one. Doesn't even matter if that's Sauce Gardner. I'm just going to throw it. I like that in an offense. It's fine. George Pickens is your best player. I think you should be getting the ball to him. I've talked about that so many times of how get the ball to 14 and listen, I'm fine with it. You might miss a read or two every now and then, but you're giving the shot to that guy. It's not bad process to give the shot to 14 because you could see some of the catches he can make. He just makes catches guys don't. And so I appreciate, Russ's ability to just turn and say, okay, I'm just going to give it to him. Just trust him. And Russ, again, and Russ's strength is his deep ball. He throws that gorgeous lofting moon ball. And so it's a really nice match made for him and Pickens. They kind of feed off each other. They fit each other very well.
And that kind of virtuous cycle, when the game plan or whatever it was, Justin maybe not trusting the throw, going away from Pickens, then he gets kind of, his head is out of the picture. So when Russell was feeding him, he's getting his head in the game. He's making those great catches that where you talked about some drops. Now, the other thing with Russell, given the concern about sacks that we had going into this game, he was under center quite a bit, and he was also sort of using a lot of cadence, with his calls to try to sort of picture what the defense was doing. And the other thing you mentioned in previous podcasts about Fields being the see it and throw guy, he has to see it first, then throw it. Whereas it seems from your analysis, Russell was more anticipatory, just based on where the play was going. He was confident to just throw those balls, not necessarily seeing the open receiver and then throwing it. Is anything to that effect?
I'm not sure. I think Russ is a see it throw guy too. I don't know. I just think he's more comfortable kind of understanding the change sometimes from pre to post, what some defenses do. He kind of knows where he's going to go. And I think he's confident in it, which I think is good. Russ is confident in his arm, and Russ is confident in his reads. I thought the offense just moved well. They didn't have delay of games. They didn't have false starts. They didn't have, these procedural penalties that had kind of bit them for most of the year. He made some play calls that changed the line that worked well. Changing protection calls around. I think that he did a nice job just operating the cleanliness of this offense well. I'm still not. I don't think they're going to be at that level of, they scored on 6 of 7 drives, I think, to end the game. I don't think they're going to be on that level. I mean, I think there's still concerns with the offense at times. And I think, when just like we were talking about with Fields, through the first 4 games where he had a really, really nice stretch there than the last 2 where he might have struggled a little bit more. There's probably going to be things that pop up in Russ's game, and this is not a perfect offense, but they're looking fine if they can get playmaking ability from those guys like that, and then they can add a playmaker to this room. I think that's going to be the other thing. But I think Russ just looked really comfortable in there, trusting the scheme. And yeah, when he has a run game like he did on Sunday, that's when he's at his best. If the Steelers can run the ball, that's really what makes everything churn. If Najee Harris and Jalen Warren are kind of working as the tandem, they'll be okay, because Russ is much better trusting I think Russ not only is much better with the run game, but I also think when you see the play action success, I think part of that is because of the run game. And you saw the Jets back off. They didn't load the box as much.
Out of money, I know. What are you when you're rich as hell? We're going to give you tax cuts. We're going to pay you.
I am not rich as hell. I work hard. I scrape to get by. Donald Trump wants to give tax breaks to billionaires, but Kamala Harris has plans to help us. She's going to crack down on price gouging and cut taxes for working people like me. I voted for Donald Trump before, but this time I'm voting for Kamala.
And speaking of one of those major concerns, which has loomed over the Steelers to date, is the lack of a legitimate number 2 wide receiver. And we know there's been some flirtations here and there with different names popping up. The latest being Cooper Kupp, with LA Rams signaling that they are open to trading Cooper Kupp. And the Steelers, of course, are rumored to be one of the teams in the mix. What's your thoughts on this yet another name receiver being dangled before the Steelers nation, anxious to secure that wide receiver number 2?
Yeah, it's like the Steelers are after anybody with a pulse. Mike Williams has been a talk, right? I mean, the fans were literally chanting at the end of the game at Mike Williams, Jets receiver. He was going to be in a Steelers uniform next week, which is funny to me. But the Steelers have been we've talked about this, John. They've scoured the earth. They've gone everywhere to try and find a wide receiver. It just hasn't clicked. The cost benefit has not clicked yet. They couldn't get Devontae Adams. They didn't get Brandon Ayuk. This is the latest one. I mean, Kupp is completely different from both of those guys. Yes, he's a superstar receiver that's still very good. Hasn't played a full season since 2021. There's injury concerns here. He's coming off a high ankle sprain that he suffered earlier this year. He will be back this Thursday, but again, where's he at explosiveness-wise with the high ankle? He's still a very good receiver, but this is a guy that is a power slot. And there's not many great power slot wide receivers in the league. And when you think of what the Steelers need in this offense, I'm not sure you think power slot right away. I think you think, trying to get Van Jefferson out of there and get another outside guy. That's why, the names thrown around like Mike Williams and Darius Slayton or DeAndre Hopkins, or those names have been thrown around more than a guy like Kupp. But Kupp's really interesting. He's a great blocker. I mean, we talk about the McVay scheme. Smith is part of that McVay branch, so there's obviously things you can take. He'd be a great underneath receiver that can get you tough first downs. I'm just interested to see how the Steelers would use him. Would they use him more outside? Would they use him more like the Van Jefferson role and then kick him inside? I mean, their second best wide receiver has clearly been Calvin Austin, who is far more open on film than it looks like. I know he had the bad drop against the Jets on third down, but he's been putting out good film the past few weeks. And he should be a heavily featured part of the offense. And so maybe you get him more opportunities outside. I think he can do it. I know he's like 5'7", but I still think he can do it. He's quick enough. He gets off press. So I think Kupp's an interesting fit in the offense where I think he can block well. I think he can get you this kind of underneath separator, this chain mover that you can look to on third down and scheme up. He definitely will take off pressure from George Pickens. I think that's something. So if you see a team that's going to want to sit in too high and play, cover 2, cover 4, cover 6, and try and take away George Pickens because they're not going to give him man-to-man opportunities like the Jets did, well, then Kupp can be the guy that you can turn to kind of shred that, right? Or if they want to take both of them away, then that opens up Pat Freiermuth. And so that's kind of what you would end up doing there. So he's a good fit in the offense. I do think there has to be a cost-benefit analysis to a guy that's been hurt like that, though. He's 31 years old. And they want a second-round pick, but they're willing to take on the salary. I mean, listen, if you're the Steelers and you want to win a playoff game, I mean, this is the type of move you make, right? This instantly elevates your offense. I think there's definitely a cost-benefit analysis to what this means for the future of the team. But as I've said many times before, the Steelers want to win playoff games this year. They want to win this year. And so even if you as a fan or as an analyst say, I don't really view the Steelers as a legitimate Super Bowl team, which is completely your prerogative. They're not thinking that, nor should they. This defense is getting older. TJ Watt's 30. Minka Fitzpatrick's going to be 28. Cam Hayward's 35. Your superstars are not getting any younger. And so I think there's definitely a cost-benefit analysis to getting a guy like Kupp and asking, is he a perfect fit? Is he the perfect blend? Do you want to give up a second for him? Maybe you'd give up a third. I think a second is a little heavy. Maybe you do what the Jets did, where it's like, okay, we'll give you the third with conditions to make it a second. That could be something to look at. But I think the Steelers should be heavily in on this one. I think they should look at it because, again, if you want postseason success, you make big boy moves like this. That you need a playmaker at wide receiver. You need someone to take pressure off Pat Freiermuth and everyone. You need to make it easier on your quarterback. Get this guy. He can change your offense. Cooper Kupp is still a very awesome, very good football player. So, yeah, I mean, I understand if you're kind of, sitting out there and a little bit you have some trepidation about it, but this is the type of move you make if you're serious about winning playoff football games.
That makes total sense. And given what we know about Tomlin and the decision, with Russell Wilson that he just made, this was all about the playoffs. And now, whether it's Kupp or whether it's one of the other names you mentioned, you're fully expecting a move to be made at wide receiver by the Steelers before the trade deadline, which I believe is in 2 weeks. Is that correct?
Yep.
So whatever needs to happen has to happen in the next 2 weeks, and you are expecting something to happen at the receiver position.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this receiver room needs to get upgraded one way or another. It's just not good enough. Like the Steelers did what they did on Sunday because the one dude they had stood on his head and played an unbelievable game. George Pickens was unreal, and they had both running backs had a great game, and so did Fryermuth. You're not going to have 4 or 4 clicking all the time, right? Not all 4 of them are going to be having great games. And again, I think there's more kind of wine to kind of make there with Calvin Austin. I really think that they need to feature him more, especially because he fits what they want to do, right? The deep ball. He's open all the time. Watch the tape against the Jets and watch him just cook dudes for 2.5 hours on offense. I know the stats aren't like glaring out, but you watch the tape and Calvin Austin is having a pretty nice season. They need to feature him more, but they need someone else. I think preferably, John, it's not a power slot like Kupp. I think preferably it would have been, an Ayuk or Adams that plays outside, or you look at who might be out there right now. I like the idea of Darius Slayton. I really do. He's a route runner type, probably only costs you a day 3 pick. I like the outlook of that. You get a separator that makes it easier for you to get open throws, right? That's more of a direct one-of-one replacement for Deontay Johnson, who you never really replaced when you traded him this offseason. And the Steelers want to set up their deep passing game. I mean, I don't think, Kupp is a seam breaker that can make that, but he's an underneath kind of chain mover, and, they could look for that. And I certainly, as I said earlier, with what I think Kupp can bring, I certainly think that he can be a guy that can play inside and out a little bit. But I think additionally, if you get a guy like Slayton, that's a guy that wins deep. He's got the speed. He separates. So I think that's the more natural fit. But, I still look like a guy at a guy like Kupp, and I don't think you can scoff at it. There's just not really that type of talent in the room outside of George Pickens. So I think that makes a lot of sense to make. I also think if they don't want to make that move, I think you have plenty of options like Slayton out there. They make a lot of sense for them.
And he's on the Giants, right?
Right, he is.
So they're going to get a close-up look at him just as they looked at Mike Williams. I guess Mike Williams didn't really play much in that Jets game, given the addition of Adams there. But Slayton will definitely play and be featured by the Giants. So does that make it is this going to be this game coming up on Monday night? Is it going to be the Steelers kicking the tires on this guy, do you think? Or what do you think?
It's possible. It depends if the Giants want to trade him because he's in the last year of his deal. He's young enough for the Giants to where if they want to extend him, they can. He's not an old player by any means. So, I mean, listen, the Giants have played this song and dance before where they have, not gone – They have to ask themselves, do they have a realistic chance of re-signing Darius Slayton? Are they going to make an earnest effort to doing that? Because if you watch the Hard Knocks off-season version, you saw what happened with Saquon Barkley and other guys where they didn't really make earnest efforts. And so they got to change that process and answer to that for themselves. If they say no, then I think the Steelers should be in on this and trying to get a guy like Slayton. If they say yes, then okay, he's not on the trade block. Doesn't sound like Hopkins is going to be in the trade block just because he doesn't want to move, and he's kind of a vet that has earned that keep where if he doesn't want to be moved, he gets to stay. And so your options might just be, a guy like Mike Williams and Cooper Kupp. And so we'll see. I think Slayton would be a really nice piece. I think Williams would just be a guy that you go full in. I mean, I think he's very similar to George. I think George is better, but I think, Williams is another jump ball, deep 50-50 guy, doesn't create much separation, can get out there and block though. I think Kupp and Williams, what they will do is open up your kind of playbook in the run game. I think Van Jefferson as a blocker has just been an absolute disaster and has hurt them significantly in the run game at times this year. So both those guys would definitely make an impact there. You would have to tweak more of the offense to fit Cup. Meanwhile, I think if you just got Williams, you just plop him right in where Van Jefferson is right now. And so there's definitely things to consider there. And Cup's a far superior player to Mike Williams at this point in his career, but we'll see where the Steelers go. Again, I think they're going to be in on every name I just said because they've been in on every single name ever. So yeah.
Right. Well, I like what you said about the blocking because, I mean, that is big in the Steelers offense. And we know from the tape, George Pickens doesn't really like to block. And wasn't he losing some snaps because of that? That was one of the reasons why he wasn't in on some of the running plays, right? Because of the blocking issue.
Right.
Am I
Yeah.
correct on that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's changed over the last 2 weeks. He's playing more of the 13 personnel and 12 personnel snaps that remember he played like 9. I think he only played 9% of those against Dallas, and then the last 2 weeks he has been the primary receiver in both of those sets. So they've changed that, and he did block against the Jets. If you go back and watch that big Freiermuth run that I was talking about, catch after the run, you'll see Pickens just digging in on this over route, and he sees Muth coming behind him and like does like a little shove and just ends up inadvertently pancaking 2 linebackers. Wow. So I mean, George blocked pretty well on Sunday. Like when he's engaged, George Pickens is a top 15, top 10 receiver when he's engaged. I mean, he's that level of talent when you get him going. So
do you think by pulling him away, in earlier in the season and not putting him in those groupings, and then sort of maybe tries to get him re-engaged, was that part of the coach's process with him?
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was part of the process. And you see it. He's played 76 and 79% of the snaps the last 2 weeks. By far, again, both of those are the highest on the team by far. Van Jefferson's taken a hit both weeks. And so, yeah, I think it's part of it. And you talk about the blocking, then you don't have to ask George to go in there and dig out guys. You really haven't been asking George to do that. You've been asking Van Jefferson to do it, and Jefferson just has not done a good job at doing it. He's been thrown off his spot, doesn't get the block at all. And so Cup or Williams would instantly upgrade both of those things for the Steelers. And that's going to be a big part of the offense, obviously.
And given, the fact that he just somehow turned it on, Pickens, was there a moment in the night where you knew that he was just going to be unstoppable, or do you think he came in with that mindset, or was it the coach, was it Wilson that had anything to do with this almost like turning the light switch?
I mean, I don't know if I saw it immediately, but you go back and we were talking about the effort stuff the week of the Cowboys game, and you go back from snap 1 through the end of the game, and I can't point to really a snap where Pickens wasn't going full go. He was engaged from the start. The Steelers fed him targets from the start. He had 6 first half targets, which is what they should be doing. This guy should be the future part of the offense. I think maybe getting him involved early, scripting plays through him early on, gets him engaged, gets him going. So I think that's part of what you should do. Get him involved early. They had 6 first half targets, and it obviously worked. He had a touchdown too. If you see a mismatch, just go for it. Like the Giants this week, they don't have anyone that can slow down George. Like I would get him involved early in offense. So I think part of it is the fact that they involve him early. I think that's something that sometimes alpha receivers need. They need that early involvement to kind of get going. And you saw what the Steelers ended up with. They ended up with a superstar performance. That was a number 1 wide receiver performance from George Pickens. That's what that was.
Absolutely. And speaking of the Giants and the matchup, how do you see this game? It'll be the last game before the Steelers go on a bye week. So obviously they want to notch themselves at 6-2 heading into the back half of the season, where all their division games await. So they're I believe the only team in the NFL who hasn't played a game within their division. So is this one of these games where we take care of business, or is this one of those games where it's closer than it should be?
This should be a take care of business game. Man, this Giants roster is not very good. They've had some injuries hit them. Andrew Thomas, their top tackle, is out for the season after getting foot surgery. It's not a very good offensive line. you don't need me to tell you how bad their quarterback play has been this year, whether it's been Daniel Jones or Drew Lock. Like they sat Daniel Jones in the fourth quarter last week. Maybe thought Drew Lock was going to start. He's probably going to have a short leash. So, I were the Steelers, I'd be on the lookout for. I'd prepare for both quarterbacks if I were them this week. I would prepare for both Lock and Jones, but Jones has been a disaster. I don't think he's thrown a touchdown on a primetime game in I think it's an incredible record or something. It's been a very long time. He has performed terribly in primetime games, just for reference. He is a guy that, hasn't really leaned in much the dual threat ability. He hasn't been able to run the offense very well, even when they've had a lot of their talent. This is an offense that has enough. I mean, the weapons aren't terrible. Malik Neighbors is a really solid star rookie wide receiver. Again, I really like Darius Slayton. As I like their slot receiver, Wan'Dale Robinson. I think they got, two decent backs, Singletary and Tyrone Tracy. The rookie Tyrone Tracy is a nice player. I like some of the players they have. The quarterback play and offensive line play have just absolutely nailed them. The Steelers up front are going to dominate this game. I am 100% calling that. This D-line should dominate the game. The Steelers are kind of in an interesting spot where they have the 23rd pressure rate in the NFL right now, which is interesting because you don't think that. But quarterbacks are getting the ball out over the last 4 weeks, I think on average, in 2.56 seconds. It's the fastest time in the NFL over the last 4 weeks, trying to neutralize this pass rush. Steelers have started to kind of adjust to it. You saw them tackle in space better. First half for the Steelers defense, obviously, they didn't tackle well at all against the Jets, but they did much better in the second half and have started to do that a little bit better. And so it's definitely quelled some of the communication concerns because you just don't have guys standing back there, and Highsmith is back now, so they can't do that. And Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson are playing better football, which is also helping out everything. So there's a lot going there. I think the concerns for the Steelers 100% come on the offensive side. Dexter Lawrence is going to be an issue. There's a real argument to be made that there has not been a better defensive lineman in football this year than Dexter Lawrence. He is an absolute problem for the Steelers. They will not have Zach Frazier in this game. They will have to play Ryan McCollum. And I thought McCollum performed well against the Jets and Quinn Williams. And Quinn Williams is a really good player. Dexter Lawrence is a different animal. I mean, they're going to have to slide there, bring in extra guys to try and take away this guy. He is a dynamic player. He can wreck a game. So they need to make sure they take care of Dexter Lawrence. He's one of those guys that can single-handedly, how TJ Watt can single-handedly destroy your game plan and take over games and force turnovers. That's what this guy can do. Brian Burns, one of their edge rushers, also really dynamic, bendy guy. So they're going to have – those two are going to be the biggest players to watch. Now, there's some talent in the secondary for the Giants. They got some really nice players. I like Tyler Nubin. He's young. Deontay Banks. It's a good defense. They've limited teams over the past few weeks. They've limited the Bengals. The Eagles really, really kind of pounded the ball down on them. But it's a statistically good defense that's playing with an awful offense. That's what this is. So Steelers should be able to get opportunities on this defense still. It's not like an elite defense, but it's a well-coached defense that can give you trouble. And the Steelers specifically have to worry about Dexter Lawrence. That's going to be the big one. If they can make sure Lawrence just doesn't take over this game, if Lawrence and Burns don't take over this game, the Steelers will have an ability to get points and get opportunities in this one. They can't let that happen because the Bengals, even though they won that game 17-7, again, this is an awful offense. I will not be surprised if we see a game like where we saw week 2 when the Steelers went to Denver, where the Broncos just did absolutely nothing offensively. I mean, would not surprise me at all if we see, the Giants only score 6 points in this one. That is an awful offense. So I think the Steelers defense should be able to really shut the door down in a lot of this game. Got to be ready for the quarterback switch. As I said, that's kind of the X factor here. What if Jones is struggling in halftime and then they throw in Locke? They're different quarterbacks. But man, this offense has been brutal. But the defense definitely brings its own concerns. You got to slow down those two.
All right. Well, we will definitely be looking for Russell Wilson in the offense to show us last week was not a fluke and put up some points again against, like you said, a strong front of the Giants, and collect that win on the week of Halloween heading into the bye. And we'll link up with you next Tuesday, Nick, to see how we're doing, and maybe get your 10,000-foot view on the first half of this season looking back next week, once this last game is in the book, and kind of all the ups and downs, and also seeing if they do anything at that wide receiver position. Until then, guys, we'll see you after the Monday night game on Tuesday, and go Steelers.